All set?
All right. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Today, we're going to hear directly from the candidate seeking to represent Utah's 4th Congressional District. My role tonight is simple: to keep things fair, to keep us on time, and to help voters hear clear answers on the issues that matter most. We'll begin with introductions and then move through a series of policy questions, followed by closing statements. Thank you to all of our candidates tonight for being here. Let's begin.
Thank you.
All right, so the rules for this tonight, we've got our format is straightforward. We'll begin with introductions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to introduce themselves and explain why they are running. For our main issue questions, each candidate will have 1 minute for an initial response. After each round of answers, candidates will have 30 seconds for rebuttal or response to what they heard from other candidates. On selected questions, I may ask one brief follow-up question to help clarify differences or to get more specific answers. We will rotate speaking order each round so that each candidate has equal opportunity throughout the evening. I will step in if needed to keep us on time, on topic, and respectful. We'll conclude with closing statements where each candidate will have 90 seconds. All right, please introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for Utah's 4th Congressional District.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. My name's Taylor Wright, and I'm running in the 4th Congressional District as a libertarian, and that means I love freedom, as decentralized government as possible, power to the people. The way our founders sort of viewed the Constitution to be adhered to, that's my political, I guess you'd say, platform. I cannot win. I will not win, but I have one goal in this race, and that is to press the person who more than likely will, Mr. Mike Kennedy, on the fact that we have a Constitution. He swore an oath to it, and he's betrayed it, and he's betrayed us. And the Constitution is there to keep our government in check and to keep us free. And when it gets abused, we get less free and more poor. And, you know, from the founders explicitly making it clear that Congress has to declare war, not the executive branch, that only Congress can tax, not the executive branch. And the fact that there's been multiple votes on both those issues, and he's voted against even having a vote, lets me know it's code red. It's a constitutional breach, emergency. And at this point, within my sphere of influence, I want to do everything I can to advocate for freedom, for the people here in District 4, that we're not dumb, that we actually care, that we're not just going to vote for somebody because they're Republican. And my intent is to get on the debate stage and share that. And as a general rule, if I can get 8 to 10% of the vote in a very red district, it'll send a message there are liberty-leaning people who could support the Republican candidate. But because the behavior is so egregious, they'd rather vote third-party libertarian. And there's been a track record of that actually positively affecting how the Republicans govern, being more constitutional and freedom-minded. So thank you.
Okay. And
Thank you. And this is my first time doing anything like this, so please let me know if I'm going over time.
Absolutely.
So my name is Stephen Burt, and I am running for the first time for office. And folks have asked me, why in the world would you run for U.S. House as your first race? I'm most familiar with the U.S. House. I've spent time there, so I have a real understanding as to how it operates. And the story behind my candidacy involves a conversation I had with my son and the rest of my family last year. I was returning from a trip to D.C. and talking about one of the many executive orders that the president had issued that, in my view, go well beyond the authority of the executive branch, and bemoaning the fact that Congress wasn't doing its job in pushing back. So he asked me, what can we do about that? And I said, well, somebody needs to step up in Congress, and both from a constitutional perspective, but sort of as an institutional pride perspective, Congress needs to assert its Article 1 power and say, we got this. We have authority under the Constitution that we're responsible for. You need to let us handle this. And he said, well, will our congressman push back like that? And I said, oh, my young, naive son, he will not. He has no political identity beyond what Trump says goes. And so he said, how can we push back? Am I past 90 seconds already?
No.
don't think so. Yeah, you're still good.
Okay, good. Okay. And he said, what can we do about this? And I said, somebody needs to run that can win, that's committed to the Constitution. And he looked at me in the eye and said, why don't you do it? And when your own son says that, it means something. So I was born in District 4. I've lived here my whole life. And my primary concern is that the American dream is close to out of reach for young people. and it's up to us who've benefited from it to ensure that it's passed on to the next generation.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Yeah, I'm Seth Stewart, and I'm from American Fork. I'm running for Congress in the U.S. House, 4th Congressional District, because of what I've seen in abuses of power from the local level all the way to the national level. I've previously run for city council, and I was frustrated because our municipal government doesn't really listen very well to the needs of the people. And I found out that that's because here in the state of Utah, municipalities are regarded as creatures of the state. So they basically do whatever the state legislature lets them get away with. And I've been monitoring the state legislature in their committee hearings and testifying. I think I testified every day that they had their committee hearings this last session. But I was reviewing hundreds of bills and finding just egregious overreaches. And so I started running for the state Senate in my district, Senate District 21. And yeah, there've been a really huge bunch of just highly unconstitutional bills that are being pushed through there. And so I've been raising the alarm on that. And every day when I'd testify, though, I'd cite clauses in Utah's constitution and also point out, hey, this isn't pursuant to any enumerated power. And it seems like that just didn't get any traction with them. It doesn't seem to be a language that they speak. And so that's when I realized that the state regards itself as a creature of Washington. So essentially, the governance model for the United States has become all political power is centralized in Washington. And so you have this top-down hierarchy, and the local people aren't allowed to question it. And that's the complete opposite of the popular sovereignty and federalism model envisioned by the founding fathers. You know, the
Weird.
states created the federal government. Are we over time?
Yep. A little bit.
All right. Got
But
so much
thank
to
you.
say. Thank you so much. But that's
Oh,
in a
thank
nutshell
you.
Good job.
why I'm running.
All right.
And for my part, I'm here to listen to you all as much as I am to talk. So
Mhm.
I appreciate that. I'd like to talk more about that. So
Okay.
Sounds great.
Well, thank you. And let's begin with an issue that many Utah families are feeling directly every day. So, affordable housing remains a top concern for many Utahns. What do you see as the main cause, and what would you do in Congress to help? Let's start with you this time.
yeah, it's such a good question. Houses have become out of reach for too many, particularly young people, and we can't have a scenario in which we're satisfied with folks being able to rent as opposed to own. Owning your own home is a really material part of the American dream. So you ask the question of why there are a lot of economic factors contributing to why the cost of housing has gone up like it has. But from a federal perspective, kind of drafting off of what Seth and Taylor have said, the primary tool that Congress has to make housing more affordable is the kinds of federal policies like tax policy and ensuring that we have the right incentives in place for first-time homeowners. There were incentives in place during my upbringing and when I first bought a home that have either been diminished or have gone away. And I would want to restore those to try and ensure that if you're a first-time home buyer, you have an opportunity to benefit from the kinds of programs that I benefited from.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And then,
Yeah, so I would say the number one problem behind housing costs is the Federal Reserve, which gets to monkey with interest rates. There's no constitutionally enumerated power for them to do that. Also, inflation, which has stolen to the tune of, by my estimates, $1 million per individual today. In today's dollars, you have 3,000% effective inflation. And you also have the federal government seizing the majority of Western lands as a prerequisite to our being granted statehood. So one of the things that I would advocate for is not only pull the plug on the Federal Reserve, but also restore the Homestead Act and allow the local people to propose town sites, issue those to the state government, and raise those to the federal government. Say, let's purchase these home lots that are reasonably sized and sustainable, 5 acres per family minimum, and so that people can live, lower the cost of housing that way, and use the proceeds to lower the budget deficit.
okay.
Well, that was great. Homesteading 1000%. I mean, that's the way this country started, and we have too much government land, and people have no idea that when you shrink the amount of land available, you just cause problems. And we also have like states like California and New York, you can't even live there. The people have to flee there because the regulations are so bad, the taxes are so bad, the average person can't make it. So we're just blacking out large portions of the United States now, and then the people have to come here. He mentioned that the homesteading, that is 1000% true. People should be able to live on land for a period of time. We don't have to make it egregious. It can be 2 or 3 acres. But we have land that only people could be able to make fertile and fruitful, and it just sits there. And actually, it's a problem because it becomes an environmental issue. The government does not take care of it. The Bureau of Land Management can't take care of it. The tragedy of the commons, we see it with the Great Salt Lake. It ends up being a sort of a crony capitalistic deal where a few people benefit and everybody else gets messed over. So beyond that, get rid of this crazy, stupid tariffs, make it easier to get steel and concrete, and stop the mandates on certain things that have to be built in homes from the federal government perspective, because it costs about $3,000 or $4,000 just on certain safety mechanisms. So.
Okay, thank you. So we aren't going to do the 30-second rebuttal this time because I heard a lot of similarities, though there are plenty of
Can I use 30
differences.
seconds to ask a
Yeah,
follow-up
no, of
question?
course.
Is that okay? So my last recollection is about 62 or 63% of land in Utah is owned and managed by the federal government, which is an enormous quantity. You use the word seizure, that the government has seized Western lands. I'm curious about that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if you look in the enabling acts of Congress for the Western states being granted statehood, like the 1894 Enabling Act, that's provision number 2 in Congress's declaration saying you have to cede this much, all of your unincorporated lands over to the federal government in perpetuity. So the intent from the beginning was not to allow us to settle and access those lands, and we've been locked out of them ever since.
So you're saying that one of the conditions to statehood was the granting of those land rights, but you called that a seizure.
Yeah, so I consider it a seizure because it's
Okay.
not pursuant to any enumerated power. The federal government doesn't have power it doesn't have squatters' rights on the land, right? We have a right to live on the land, and they don't have a right to prevent us from doing that.
Can I get 30 seconds?
Yeah.
So the one thing I would like to add is we have to make the choice. The government right now controls how much you can pollute, how much you can, so on and so forth. The answer to all this is property rights. The EPA lets big business get away with so much. Like, we think we're protected. It's the exact opposite. It protects the big business. When a company pollutes and it damages my house or my lungs, I should be able to sue that company. We have intertangled crony capitalism with thinking that that's protecting our environment when it is doing anything but. So.
Okay, well, we have time for one more if anyone else has rebuttal. Okay, well, then let's move on to the next question. All right, so our district has benefited from growth tied to the part of the tech company and the boom down there. While AI may reshape many existing jobs, how would you help workers and families prepare for the economy of tomorrow while keeping Utah competitive?
Well, from a federal government, from a Utah Congressional District 4 candidate, I don't have the knowledge or the information to know how to exactly help every single family. It's really not my expertise, and my goal there is to represent us and to advocate for the sort of the constitutional approach that our founders had. I think one thing that we can do is we can stop running deficits, which create inflation. Every time we run a deficit, we make it harder for private people to borrow money too, which drives up interest rates even privately. So the one thing the federal government can do is have sound money, stop running deficits, which make it harder for businesses to borrow and for people to borrow, and then just let AI and entrepreneurs handle it. And the free market is dynamic, and it's a beautiful thing. So,
Okay,
thank you.
we're gonna start over here then.
Yeah, so in order to be prepared for a new economy, you have to restore property rights, and I totally agree with that. You look at the way congressional policy has been implemented, and so much of it, I've lost count, but I think we're near totality in terms of the planks of the Communist Manifesto that have been implemented by our government. And the purpose of that is the abolition of private property so that people do not have sound economic ground to stand on. The word economy derives from Greek economia, which means household management. The government doesn't actually have authority to regulate the economy in the sense of, managing wealth or promoting spending through various programs and so on, or giving subsidies. The way you help people prepare for the future is you allow them to keep their own property, you let them live on the land. And I would also add, end the Department of Education, because that's been preparing the people to become serfs, essentially, who are dependent on the government for their livelihood.
Okay.
So you mentioned technological advancement, in particular AI, and I think it's useful to learn from history that every meaningful technological advancement has been accompanied by anything from understandable concern about what it will mean for the people to kind of paranoia. And so it's easy to look at AI and wonder whether it's going to, eviscerate job growth, et cetera. But I think we need to acknowledge that it's here and it's not going away. So how do we manage it? How do we deal with it? From my perspective, what Utah has done to try and evaluate how AI can help us and not the other way around, and the federalism perspective of the laboratories of democracy, I think Utah's AI office has done a good job of trying to figure out how to regulate AI. And the federal government has tried to stop it. It's come to Utah and said, we want you to stop because we need a national federal standard. So for my part, the federal government butting out for the time being and letting the states that want to be those Madisonian laboratories of democracy is the next best step when it comes specifically to AI.
Okay. Do we have anyone who wants to begin with the rebuttals?
I do. I'd like to challenge Taylor actually on the fiscal point that it's the reckless spending that fuels inflation. I will grant that there's pressure there, and that's something that Elon Musk has said. But I would argue actually it's the very fact that an inflation machine exists that is what incentivizes the reckless spending, because the government knows that they can just turn to these central banks, which will then get these injections of printed money to bail them out. So what do you think about that?
Well, no, inflation is and always has been a monetary phenomenon. So when there's an increase in the monetary supply, that's really what causes inflation, not even tariffs or government regulation or even taxes and so forth. So yes, to your point, in an ideal world, we would have competing currencies, whether that be crypto or actual, just, to have a medium of exchange where the government can't manipulate it. They can't cause these bubbles and these inflationary tsunamis. And I was just making the point that since we have a U.S. dollar that we feel like we have to use, within that, when the government, not counting the 38 trillion, but just even a deficit annually, if we got back to even close to running just a surplus or not having a deficit, that would drive down costs, interest rates, and allow for people to get into the homes and so forth. But I absolutely agree with your point. So.
Okay. Anyone else?
These guys know a lot about monetary policy. I have nothing to say.
Okay.
You're a good man. You're a good man.
For our next question, Utah faces water scarcity concerns, and much of the state is federally managed land. How should Utah balance growth, conservation, and local control over resources? Let's start over here this time.
Yeah, so growth and conservation and the ecology essentially argument have actually been deployed to prevent settlement of the lands. But if we've learned anything from American history and the settlement of lands and ecology, look at, for example, the Dust Bowl. There was fabulous permaculture on the plains that got uprooted, and that's what led to these enormous dust storms and the desiccation, the drying out of the prairies. And it was only when we returned to, say, planting trees, for example, to act as a windbreak against that effect and various other restoration activities that we began to rehydrate those areas. So actually, water retention is what we should be focusing on. And Taylor brought up the really great point earlier that if you allow people to settle the lands, they'll improve them. So allowing people to settle the lands is essentially that's how you get the greenery. I've had a friend come over from another country, see the Utah Valley here. What a beautiful place you found here. And I said, it didn't look the same 180 years ago, but there are all these beautiful trees everywhere. That's because people settled and developed it.
Awesome.
Okay.
I mean, that's such a good question. It comes up all the time when I talk to people, and it's especially pointed right now because of the terrible winter that we just had. I'm really grateful that apparently we got 20 inches of snow up near Tony Grove over the weekend, so we're getting some late season moisture that we need. But, the vast majority of the federal lands, or the land in Utah being managed by the federal government, there may be a future in which that changes, but politics is the art of the possible. So one thing that we need to really focus on is closer communication and coordination with the federal agencies that manage those lands, and ensuring that we have the right stakeholders in place. And we need to ask ourselves questions about our use of water and see if we're comfortable with, for example, the amount of water that's going to grow alfalfa, for example. As I understand it, I'm no expert, but the folks I've spoken with say that there are certain crops that take an inordinate amount of water, and I don't think that we evaluate the value of those water shares in a way that's consistent with what local communities need.
Okay, thank you.
Could you just repeat the question one more time so I can?
Yes. So Utah faces water scarcity concerns,
Yes.
and much of the state is federally managed land. How should Utah balance growth, conservation, and local control over resources?
As Seth said, I mean, homesteading is so important to that. The thing is, we've let the federal government get it to this point, and also the state of Utah, it just has a poor track record of managing land and water, and it's because the state's in control of it. And so, the one thing we should do is not try to limit people coming here. I know Governor Cox got on the TV and said, "Don't come here from California." But I'm against that. I want people to come here, and I think that we have to have market-oriented solutions as much as possible. We also have to realize that like we can have a lot of state land or government land, and I know it's cool to look at and things of that nature. But we it just creates poverty and homelessness here. You know, at some point when the land is being unused and it's sitting there, and there's people sleeping on the streets, we got to put people before a pretty, land or, a subjectively, so on and so forth. So anyway,
Yes.
thank you.
All right. Floor is open, gentlemen. Anyone like to begin?
I'll start and
Okay.
on that beautification point and the preservation of the wilderness areas. That's one of the first items of pushback that I've gotten when I said put some of those lands up for sale. Obviously, the amount of space that you need for residential settlements is minuscule compared to the total amount of space that's out there. So I would submit, if you use the model of the early pioneers of these concentrated residential settlements with like half-acre lots, square mile or so on a grid system, and then you have the surrounding area be farmland and pasture land, and then wilderness, right? If you use that model as opposed to this urban sprawl, then you don't have to worry about the beauty aspect of it, because honestly, a lot of it's just dirt and sagebrush, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think?
No, I can I take the 30 seconds because of dirt. So I agree 1000%. I'm open to learning and navigating that as we go. He does have a point about it is like what actually can we get done? But yes, from a theoretical perspective, we also have to we have to advocate for the fact that like that like every time people demonize when the talk of privatizing lands come up, and it's like, guys, we have people sleeping on the streets. People have to live at home till they're 30. You're and the land itself is not taken care of. Whether it's wildfires, whether it's all kind of other things, the government cannot take care of the land. There's no incentive. And I've had friends who work for BLM. They're decent people, but they're not going to think about it when they're off the clock. If it's your backyard, you're worried about the weird plant that's just growing in the back. So, yeah.
Okay.
So quick 30 seconds, right?
Yep.
So in response to both of these gentlemen, first, the notion of putting wilderness areas up for sale is something I would oppose, because the idea that a land's value is only in its development, I do not believe in that at all. I think that we've gotten to a point where we view the land as having value in and of itself. And given the enormous amount of land we have, I don't disagree that we should make more of it available for development, but that there's so much of it available. I think we need to preserve the stuff that is unique, the stuff that is drawing tourists, that has beauty in and of itself. And I think we need to be very careful about the idea that we would put some of those areas up for sale.
Okay.
Can I get one more?
All
A
right.
little bit.
Yes.
So, I would say I'm not proposing that we go and build a city on top of Mount Timpanogos or at any national monument or anything like that. Just to be super clear here, we're talking about like the valleys that are just empty, full of dust. And the pioneer model was you had cities that were a day's journey on foot apart from each other. The idea being you can never be stranded in the wilderness, but it's not so dense that you feel crowded.
Okay. All right. Next question. Utah is often recognized as a leader in healthcare innovation, provider growth, and medical industry expansion, making healthcare important both to families and to the state economy. What should Congress do, if anything, to help lower healthcare costs while supporting a strong healthcare system?
Healthcare is a perfect example of when the government starts intervening, it dysregulates two things, the supply and the cost. So when you subsidize it, the cost goes up. When you overly regulate it, the suppliers go down, and it creates imbalances. then the solution is we have to have Medicare for all of these kind of things. The best thing we could do for everyone is to deregulate as much as possible healthcare, all the way down to is if you can be a heart surgeon, you shouldn't have to go to school for 13 years. Make it a 3-year system. Now, the federal government, what's their role in that? There's things they could do with licensing and other things, certain coverages. You could, if you have Medicare, if you give it to the people, you could say, hey, incentivize the states to deregulate it. Say, hey, look now, you don't have to go to heart surgery school for 14 years. You can do it in 3 years. Those are bipartisan issues. I agree with the fact that the government shouldn't even be in healthcare because the fact that it is, therefore, the most important things the government should not touch. If education is very important and healthcare is very important, the market should be doing those things. So yeah.
Okay, and then let's go back over here.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I wholeheartely agree that the government should not regulate healthcare because it's not pursuant to any enumerated power. There's a way that the Supreme Court tried to figure out to get the states to do it for them. They've invented this fictitious precedent of plenary police powers through Jacobson v. Massachusetts in 1905. Tried to enforce a vaccine mandate, and they threw in a misinterpretation of Federalist Number 45 to try to do that. But both the state and the federal governments, there was a huge disappointment with Obamacare, for example, through the two-party system. You had that installed, and then the Republicans, when they had the chance to repeal it, they didn't. They just got rid of the individual mandate and kept the rest of those controls. Donald Trump's been calling for price controls on pharmacy and so on, but that's just a way to selectively shutter certain businesses. So they absolutely need to get their hands out of it if we want to have any hope of recovering our own and managing our own healthcare costs.
Okay.
So, from a constitutional perspective, I take the point about the 10th Amendment has enumerated powers to the federal government and left everything else to the states. And amongst the things that are enumerated for state control are the health, safety, welfare, morals. The HSWM is the acronym that's used in ordinary kind of constitutional analysis. So I think that the states have a bigger role to play than they do on the kind of healthcare markets that they can foster. My wife is in healthcare, and this is one of those issues that's so complex that I would defer to the experts on it. I don't pretend to have, unique expertise about the cost of healthcare, but I would say that looking around the world at models that have worked and trying to, within constitutional parameters, make healthcare available to people at as low a cost as possible would be my goal. I'd have a very means and ends perspective on this. We should not be the richest nation in the world and have people go into medical debt and have medical debt be the number one driver of bankruptcy. And whatever we need to do within constitutional parameters to make that improve on that is what I would support.
Okay.
Can I get a rebuttal?
All right. Yes.
I think with Obamacare, they stopped the bankruptcy aspect. But the reason that we even have bankruptcy is because the government continued to subsidize it and regulate it. What we want is dynamic innovation and creativity, and we don't want to constrict it. And all we've done is constrict the suppliers of healthcare, nurses, doctors. And then the fact that if you know you have an ailment, you should be able to go and get medicine for it without going to a doctor, without paying $400. We have too much technology. ChatGPT is probably more intelligent, or at least can give you more information than a doctor can, And so from that, I think we have to just, if you love people and you want everybody to have health care, which I do, like in theory, we have to deregulate it. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have one challenge for you, Stephen. I would ask, do you believe that states should be held to within their enumerated powers?
Yes.
So if their constitution doesn't say they can do it, they can't do it.
Well, I mean, I think that the 10th Amendment has left more power to the states than we currently believe. I mean, back to your point about the federal government being viewed as the primary level of government. But I think I'd have to unpack this in more than 30 seconds. But I think generally I agree with that. But I also think that the states have more than just enumerated powers. They have kind of categories of power that they can exercise within. But when it comes to the relationship between the federal and state governments, I think that we need to take a closer look at the 10th Amendment and ensure that we're leaving more to the states than we currently do.
Can I speak to that just for a sec? So the Federalist at number 45 quotation that's used is that the powers reserved to the states are, quote, numerous and indefinite. That doesn't mean unlimited. It just means that national constitution doesn't define what those are, right? It doesn't mean the state constitutions don't define them. They do, right? So they're still enumerated. They still have to be delegated. And I would submit
I
that
mean, under the state constitution.
under the state constitution. So
understood.
there's still a perfect analogy between the federal and state constitutions. They don't have a license to do just whatever, just because the Supreme Court said so. That's one of the biggest things I'm trying to fight right now. That's the key to ending abortion right there, because that's been a states' rights issue, so-called. But I disagree with that. Hopefully, we'll get to that. But yeah, I would say look at the last part of the 10th Amendment, reserved to the people.
And I'd want to look closely at the Utah State Constitution and see what it has to say on this topic too.
Okay. So many policy debates ultimately come down to priorities and how government allocates resources. Okay. And the next question is, the federal budget continues to grow rapidly. What priorities should Congress focus on most in the next 2 years, and what areas would you manage more efficiently? I'll start with you.
So I think we need to balance our budget. We need to commit to that, and we need to make the hard decisions. We did it once, as I understand it, back in the mid to late 90s, and we haven't done it since. We haven't passed a budget in the way that the Constitution prescribes since that time. So as is the case with so many of these questions, we need to return to both the constitutional order and the initial congressional order. The Congress has not operated as it's supposed to in a long, long time. And if we don't have the means to support the spending, we should start making the hard decisions and cut spending. We can't pretend like there's any solution to this budget issues other than cutting spending. That's the only solution.
Okay. We're going to go to you next.
Yeah, the first place I would look for spending to cut would be on things that aren't pursuant to enumerated powers. There are an awful lot of social programs and socialism in our government today. This information might be dated, but as I recall, a few years ago, I looked at our defense budget, and I think it was about 2/3 of it that got spent on pensions and personnel costs. There's definitely a lot of bloat there. Obviously, we want to have good defense, but that shouldn't come down to really fat paychecks for people who sit around in offices. In terms of the other programs, public education, it's a plank of the Communist Manifesto. Why are we doing it? And that is something that is in the Utah Constitution, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not as well equipped to fight that at the state level. But I would say let's take a hard look at those things. Your property taxes, so many taxes just go to these welfare programs. We need to cut them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have an above all approach. I think if you're going to cut, I think the elderly and the people who have paid in all to the Social Security and to the Medicare, I think hopefully we cut that last. But this insanity with Donald Trump wanting to make the military budget $1.5 trillion and this $300 billion war, I think the military is way too big. I think we could cut 80% of it, to be honest with you. And I think there's so much bloat in that, and it's sickening. And then all the Medicare fraud and stuff, it's all. So just anything, we have to have a above all on board to cut. But I would say if we can try to, if we're going to keep some, the slice that we do, help the folks who have paid in and the people who are, 78 years old and, on a pension. So.
Okay. All right. Who would like to begin?
I would just say Medicare is fraud.
Yeah.
It's not just that there is fraud in it, but
Sure.
And maybe just one little example a lot of taxpayers aren't aware of is that your Social Security and Medicare taxes are actually twice what the government reveals that they are in your paycheck, because they deduct the same percentages before you even have your gross earnings in your paycheck.
Mhm.
So they take that out of your employer as well.
Exactly.
So
I
it's not
agree.
pursuant to an enumerated power. I would say it's fraud.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else would like to go for the rebuttal?
No, I think we're good.
All right.
I like we're pounding through these questions.
Yeah,
These are
We're
great.
getting done.
Good.
We are going pretty fast. So
We're doing
if
great.
anyone wants to continue talking at any point,
Yes, ma'am.
just let me know.
And then,
All right. Another national issue with major local economic and community impacts is immigration. How should America secure the border while preserving legal immigration and economic opportunity? Let's start with you.
golly, this is the hardest one I have. Well, when it comes to immigration, there's two parts to this. There's the tragedy of the commons again, because the government is in charge of the borders, and then whether it was Donald Trump or anybody, they've done a really bad job of like letting people in who maybe weren't that they were trying to keep out, quote unquote. And then there's so much of a welfare state here that then you have an incentive for the people to come here. They're not bad people, but there is an incentive. So you have the welfare state, which they can access some Medicaid and the benefits. Then they travel on government roads and they use government, basically subsidized nonprofits to have houses to be able to live, basically, and also have medical care. You can go to the. I love people, and I taught school and would have many kids who were immigrants, Venezuelan, beautiful, great, awesome people. But you would see five, and they would have to go to the hospital, and so we have such a tough thing. The one thing I would say is this: we have to make we have to make legal immigration much easier. We want productive and good people. We don't want to just have like this ethos state where it's only people who are of English heritage and all this kind of stuff. We have to realize that, man, we want great, dynamic, but good people. We have to cut the welfare state first, and then we have to stop the ability for folks to come here through government subsidized means, so on and so forth, and make legal immigration easier. We shouldn't have to pay $1 million like we're brandishing about now to be able to be a citizen. So that's my thoughts on it. So.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily agree that what drives people to want to emigrate to the United States is the welfare state. I think that's part of the allure for sure. But I remain of the view, and this is true of the immigrants that I know, that we are still, notwithstanding the challenges we face, the land of opportunity, right? And people want to come here not only because they want benefits, but because they want freedom. And they want, in some instances, to escape the oppressive and less focused on liberty places that they're coming from. And I think that's a good thing. It's true that a disproportionate number of entrepreneurs in America are immigrants. A disproportionate number of the crimes committed are not committed by immigrants. There's a lot of fallacies out there, and I feel pretty strongly that the Trump administration did a very good job of securing the border. We needed to secure the border. They did that. But we need to be a welcoming country, but we need to have an orderly process for allowing people to come here and gain citizenship.
Okay.
It's the national government's responsibility to secure the borders, and they've been derelict in that responsibility for 4+ years, and actually quite a bit longer than that if you look back. Obviously, we have an obligation to ensure that there aren't, foreign sleeper cells coming through here and so on, and criminal gangs and so on. Obviously, those are real. It's also obviously, hopefully, the case that that's not everyone, right? The welfare programs do play a big role, so we do need to eliminate those incentives. I've seen people celebrate a bill in the Utah legislature saying that those benefits wouldn't apply to illegals, but then I found myself thinking, well, is this normalizing welfare for American citizens though? So we got to be careful about that. But we also need to make sure that we're checking the government's homework, making sure that we follow due process, warrant requirements for everybody, because if we allow anybody to be deported without that sign off from the people saying, yes, you actually prove your case, as opposed to just being papers, please, that kind of an environment hazards fascism factually.
Okay.
I need to rebuttal and challenge Stephen. So I don't think I said, but I don't think I said this, but I definitely don't think people come here for the welfare state. I think they come here because they want to contribute, and they share a lot of the values that we have as people, which is self-reliance, freedom, entrepreneurship. I think it's hard when there is such a generous welfare state, and almost even when people are granted temporary status, there is access to Medicaid that you cannot turn people down and I know you have experience in healthcare, and so it is a driver. We want to. I want to live in a society where we have economic growth. We have to have immigrants for that, but also we have really great people here, and so we need to. We have to make it easier for people to come here legally and produce and incentivize businesses to do those things by not making them pay $100,000 to have somebody work for them. It just creates this black market where people are driving in trucks and they end up dying in the back of the truck and stuff. And with that said, because there's so many nonprofits that are government funded who do, you're having a distortion. You have the people who can afford to come here who are very like that little bit, and then you have a lot of people who, it's like you're exactly right about the stats. They're less likely to commit crime. All those things are true, regardless of where they come from. But you do get a higher percentage because we've basically we don't let anybody in legally hardly, and then we have either refugees that the government pays to be here, or a lot of folks who do come here for the benefit. It is a sizable portion, but those people are good people too. So we shouldn't be shooting people in the streets and going into Home Depot and just ransacking. It's a very complex issue, and it's probably the one of the issues of our times right now. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that clarification. I mean, I think that it's a good sign that people want to come here. I agree with Seth that we have to ensure that they are subjected to due process and that we're not doing the kinds of things that we've seen. We should not be camping out outside of courtrooms, churches, and schools and tackling people and taking them away. That is not a productive way for the government to operate.
I agree.
Okay. Anything else, gentlemen?
I would just say maybe to assuage the concern that anybody thinks that it's okay to have foreign national, military and paramilitary inside of our borders. I'm determined to help us find every last one of them that is inside of us. But I think that the more urgent and pressing issue than that is who's in control of our own government.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what the founding fathers said is
100%.
going to be
100%.
what would do us in.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So right now, I kind of want to bring it back to all the previous questions. Does anyone have anything that they would like to follow up with from any of the previous questions or potentially ask a new question?
I guess I want to talk about, if I can, for 90 seconds, is why I think I'm going to be someone worth a vote for, and that is in a very red district like ours. And I think ours is the most red in the Mountain West. It's right up there. When a libertarian runs in a very red district and they gain 8 to 10% of the vote.
I do have to stop you because that is very similar to our last question. So you may not want to necessarily repeat yourself too much coming up, but
All right.
that's a very good start. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to follow up with before our last question?
I'll do the immigration thing again.
Okay.
What we really do want is we want highly productive, good humans coming here. And we have to realize that, like, they may come from India, they may come from Japan, they may come from China, they may come from Norway. And we have to make it easier for those folks to come here. We've bottlenecked it and have a bureaucratic mess to come here legally. And then and I may have touched on this, but it just incentivizes people to come here in a non-legal way. And so you have a distortion of people who can come via proximity as opposed to legally. And what we really want is more legal immigration. And that's where we'll have the great people who can come from all over the world. And we need to worry less about, what we need to worry about is, having civil and economic freedom and creating a system where smart, good people yearn to be here. And we do that through freedom and having an awesome economic climate. So.
And I really like that we're spending time on the immigration issue, both because it's so important to people, but also because it's really important to Utahns and people in District 4. And I appreciate what you said about ensuring that we have an orderly process. What I think has been a mistake on immigration, there's been a lot of mistakes made, but I really go back to Ronald Reagan's last speech as president, where he chose, of all issues that he could have emphasized, to emphasize this issue. And I have a portion of the video on one of my on my Instagram feed because I was so impressed by it. But he basically says anyone can come to America and become an American, and we've facilitated the first part of that equation, and we need to do a better job of the second part, because so often in the past, some of the most patriotic people were immigrants because they chose to come here. When you make a choice to go somewhere, you're choosing it for a reason. If you're born here, I'm afraid so many of us don't appreciate the freedoms that we enjoy, and we don't appreciate how we're losing some of them. So I think immigration is an interesting issue to discuss because it can help us elucidate what underlies our political philosophies, and it also can help us think about so many other issues in a more kind of structured way. So I think I appreciate that you wanted to spend more time on immigration. I'd love to hear more from Seth about it because I'm sure you have more to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to button up one thing with immigration, and that is the uniform rule of naturalization. That's what's required in our Constitution, and executive orders and so on, and invitations saying you get a free pass or a special deal here. That's not a uniform rule. And the only rule the Constitution advances for citizenship is to make an oath to support the Constitution. So that's what I advocate for. That's what I'm saying we should return to as our uniform rule. One other, just to paint a vision, just pivoting to the housing and settlement issue once more. I think we underappreciate the value in having dispersed settlements because it would increase our access to nature and the wilderness and ensure that it's better cared for and so on, like you've been saying. So if you can imagine having more local work patterns, cut down on your commute, all these things, there are tons of benefits that I just love to get to unpack more. But I do want to also just maybe offer a few options for questions to see what there's interest in. Abortion, judicial supremacy, election integrity. Do we have any desire to engage in a question?
Oh, we've got desire. I just don't know if we have time. What
We have 10 minutes.
Okay.
10 minutes.
Okay.
Let's we can talk about another issue for probably about 5 minutes or so.
I'd love to talk about election integrity. I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay. Well, as far as election integrity is concerned, so much of the emphasis has been on illegals voting in our elections and these mysterious pallets full of ballots showing up. One of the things I've been studying over the last several years, though, has to do with the election methods themselves, as outlined by the founding fathers, and they're actually mandatory election methods in our Constitution. There are delegated elections for the presidency and the Electoral College, direct popular vote elections for the House of Representatives, that's Article 1, Section 2, and then legislative elections for the Senate. And that distinction of election methods is what the founding fathers understood guaranteed the independence of the two houses. That's what gave us bicameralism in our legislature and Congress. And I think it's actually far more fraudulent to depart from that and consolidate our election methods to where we now have all popular vote elections. They're all blue. And this is why we have a uniparty, including with the presidency. So the bound elector laws in the states, that's what they're bound to mirror the popular vote. So the national popular vote's already here. And this is something that we're not talking about enough. Yeah. There's the SAVE Act, which could give the federal government authority to deny your credential to vote. If your social credit score drops too low or something like that, this paves the way for that. So I don't know. Do you have any other input on that?
So there's a lot there. So when it comes to the biggest issue that we're experiencing now is like we have to stop the gerrymandering. The gerrymandering is horrible. It never was meant to be like this at the local level. So now we have that's my biggest election issue is like it's making whether it's ranked choice voting or some other form of electing our legislators, our representatives, and then having the legislators seat them places. But when the legislators are drawing these lines, that is the end of any sort of representative. If there was a representative government, that is killing it. Like, because not only does it make the party stay, it makes that person stay in control of that particular district, which no one's thinking about. Like, and so Virginia and Texas and where like this is the biggest threat. And like people have no concept of how bad the gerrymandering is. And I understand people are saying, well, and I agree in Utah, the legislator has the right to draw the lines. I was against the judge's ruling because it was a provision, not an amendment to the Constitution. And according to the Utah Constitution, there has to be an amendment for that. So I'm against gerrymandering. I'm not for the judge picking it based on a provision. But gerrymandering and sort of how we're doing this, and that's more of a state's issue. But that's my biggest election thing right now. It's like, holy cow, we have no idea how dangerous this is. And it's so like, it is such a threat to all of us.
And I want to talk about gerrymandering a little bit, but to your point, would you suggest, because you mentioned the provisions that are in the Constitution, but you didn't mention that some of those have been amended. Would you repeal the amendments that made the popular election of senators made the election of senators a popular vote. Would you want to repeal that amendment?
Absolutely. I refer to it, these three different election methods, as the red, white, and blue election methods. So the Republican, lowercase r, delegated elections, the legislative elections, white elections, blue, Democratic, popular vote, lowercase d on the Democrat there. I'm all for restoring the independent red, white, and blue for the United States' 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.
I like that idea. As a form of rebuttal, I want to suggest that analyzing the Constitution without reference to the amendments is kind of deceptive. To pretend as though the Constitution says what it says without, it sounds like you don't believe that the Constitution as amended is the same thing as the Constitution as originally enacted.
Yeah, well, and it is possible to amend the Constitution in such a way as to make it self-contradictory. And I would submit that those kinds of amendments are not valid.
And I would just invite you in your analysis to include that, because with some, you have an encyclopedic knowledge of the Constitution. So I know you know that it's been amended. And I would say, if it's been amended, that was part of what the founders intended, is that we as a people could amend the Constitution. I think we don't use it enough. I think people who want to make changes through executive order or even congressional action and say, well, it's too hard to amend the Constitution. Haven't we done it, 27 times? Or no, not 27, after the initial 10. How many have we, you probably know.
I think we have 27 now.
Is it 20? A lot. So we've done it a lot of times.
Yes.
And so I think to the extent that now it's hard when it comes to elections because we want to leave the states to have the control that they need to have. So when it comes to gerrymandering, I think we need to leave it to the states. I know
100%. Yeah. So, and we have 30 seconds, but 100% it's a state's issue. I just more mean you have both parties in Congress advocating for gerrymandering, including House of Representative members, and Hakeem Jeffries, Donald Trump. It's dangerous. The libertarians would say also, what about freedom? Let's try freedom. Is the Constitution, does that, the very fact that the Constitution is there, does it cause us to lose freedom because it gives the state this authority over us? And now we're arguing in between the states' lines. So there's a whole nother theory that maybe the Constitution, well, is it so great because here we are and it's grown the
Can I
government?
make just one more comment? I agree with both that the method of election needs to change. The first past the post, winner takes all method of electing people is exactly why folks like libertarians have a difficult time winning, notwithstanding the fact that I think more than 8 to 10% of people are of a more libertarian mindset. But they are forced to choose between two choices they often hate. And if we had ranked choice voting or star voting or approval voting or some method that would empower voters, I think what we would all probably be in agreement with is we need to empower people against the entrenched powerful.
You know, the approval voting is in the original Constitution.
No kidding?
Article 2, Section 1. It's supposed to be the method that the delegates in the Electoral College use to choose the president and vice president. They can do it all in one ballot.
We need to spend more time together, Seth. I need to learn this stuff.
And the 12th Amendment is what gave us the modern two-party system, and it should be repealed as well.
Okay.
Wow.
You came up with so many good topics. I'm so glad we picked this one.
Well, and if you want to end gerrymandering, don't let the government have access to party affiliation data, and don't vote along party lines.
Heck yes.
Then I would hardly care who draws the lines if the map's all gray.
I love it.
All right, this was very good, gentlemen. All right, let's move on to our final question. We'll close with one final opportunity for each candidate to speak directly to the voters. So this is the final question. What sets you apart from other candidates, and why should the people of this district vote for you? We're going to start with you.
What a good question. I'm not as good at self-promotion as I should be. So I think what sets me apart from the other candidates is the fact that I'm unaffiliated. And I've made it a point to try to get to know as many other perspectives as I can. Last week, I went to the Forward Party convention. I went to the Libertarian Party's Carl Bray dinner. I went to the Salt Lake County Republican Convention and the Salt Lake County Democrat Convention. And I mostly listened to what people had to say. And what I learned is that there is so much more in common between and amongst the voters than they are led to believe by the parties, and mostly the two major parties, who are more business interests today than they are entities that serve the people. So I think what I would say is I believe I have an ability to consolidate what voters' preferences are. I have a real connection to District 4. I know I've lived there my whole life, and I think that I could represent people in a more effective way. The second thing I would say is if you elect a Republican or a Democrat, they will go back to Washington and they will do what the party tells them to do. The most powerful people in Congress are the intermittently independent. Why not just have a consistent independent? They're so divided that they need every vote they can get. And the only way they would get my vote is if they earned it, and they'd only earn it if what they wanted done would be good for the people of District 4. I have no party loyalty.
Okay.
I believe what sets me apart from other candidates, frankly, is, well, if I can put it this way, I would actually like it if you could vote for each of us. So if we were to implement approval of balloting, then you could vote for everyone except maybe Mike Kennedy. But but
Who?
no worry. But the people need to have a voice, and these first past the post ballots are less expressive than approval votes, so where you actually get to evaluate each candidate. But I'm all about checks and balances. I'm all about not trusting the people in office. I'm all about not consolidating power, and this is what the Constitution requires. It requires you have these independence aspects of these election methods. There's something I've not even talked about yet, which is trial by jury. I recently appealed a case up to the United States Supreme Court in which I found the missing key to ending abortion in the states. And it's because Congress has actually abetted the problem of judicial supremacy. Congress gave the judiciary its rulemaking power. And so I've been going through the laws and the rules that enabled the judiciary to make these sweeping and binding pronouncements, legislating from the bench, usurping the power of the legislature. And they also usurped the power of the juries. And so we need to restore trial by jury. The founding fathers regarded that as the only way that you can hold a government to the principles of its constitution, because juries can tell the government no. They can tell all three branches no. And they're the key to jumpstarting judicial review. So that's just a handful of what I'm talking about here.
Okay. Last but not least.
Well, I want to say, I mean, God knows, I hope you win the Republican primary, and I'll support you any way I can.
Thank you.
I'm running, he knows, because I love people. I think freedom is a necessary condition for the human spirit, for the human mind to propel, to prosper, to create. Freedom is that. So for me, my love of people is why I'm running. I want to get on the debate stage with Mike Kennedy if unfortunately he beats you. And I just want to, in a respectful way, give him a night that he won't forget, that we're not dumb in District 4. We do care. We are aware. We understand that only Congress can declare war. Only Congress can tax. He swore an oath to that Constitution, and he's betrayed it. He betrayed us. And I want to press him on that. And if I can get 8 to 10% of the vote in a very red district, historically, the last 25 years, when a libertarian third-party candidate has received 8 to 10%, it sends a message to the Republican Party, and they have become more constitutional and freedom-friendly. They did that in 2008. This is a House race, even at the national level. When Ron Paul got about 15% of the vote, between 10 to 15, the first time he ran, he didn't even get that much. And he was laughed, he was mocked off the stage, he was booed. The Republicans adopted his foreign policy a few years later. And so if that can be done at the federal level, then there's countless examples at the local, we're not local, but at the smaller House races where a libertarian receiving 8 to 10%, it sends the message to the Republicans there are liberty-leaning people who could support you, but your behavior is so egregious, they would rather vote third-party libertarian. And I'm going to go to the end. And I mean, I wish we could all be on stage. I'm glad that you're for sure getting an opportunity to be on stage with Mike Kennedy. I would hope. It's about the Constitution. The Constitution is there to keep our government in check and to keep us free. When it gets violated, we get less free and more poor. And it's not about a party or a person. It's about freedom.
Can I do a follow-up? You mentioned, and I would like to know, Seth, what is the plan for? And we're on your live feed, so I think it's useful for you to. How does it work for you tomorrow? Are you going to have a chance to get up and say your piece at the? How is that going to work tomorrow?
There is time that's scheduled for the candidates for Congressional District 4 to take the stage and give a 3-minute speech.
Okay.
That's what I've been informed the agenda is.
What time?
12:30 p.m. last I heard.
Okay, I might try to be there.
All right.
I would love to hear you up there with the others. That would be great.
Well, it's meant to be a public venue. You got to check all their boxes. Their security there is ridiculous. But
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
all right.
We love to see other candidates supporting each other, especially with how split America seems right now. So it's really nice to see candidates.
And
kind
I don't think we're nearly as split as the parties
No.
want us to believe, because they are so intent on maintaining their power. And if we had more conversations like this, we would learn that the real division of the real division that matters in America is not left versus right. It's top versus bottom. It's the powerful versus the people.
I 100% agree, which is why I'm very happy that we were able to do this debate. However, that was our final question. So thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you so much, our audience and everyone that watched on the live stream. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Whatever your views are, an informed and engaged electorate is essential to represent our government. We need clarification. We need transparency to see what everyone believes and is talking about. So thank you so much for everyone. And please stay involved, stay informed, and have a great evening.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can we each just say like where people can find us real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so I'm Seth Andrew Stewart. I'm running in the Republican Party's convention tomorrow, and you can find me at sethandrewstewart.com. I've been going through the delegate process here, and I absolutely love the caucus convention. Want to do everything I can to preserve it.
All right.
StephenBurt.com with a V. And from there, you can find that I've become more active on Instagram thanks to my son's instruction. So I'm learning to make videos. But this is my first time doing something like this, and I didn't know it would be televised, so I don't look as sharp as these gentlemen. But
And so rightforutah.com is the website. I have a little podcast, Saving Humanity Podcast. It's on YouTube, the Saving Humanity Podcast, but Saving Humanity Podcast. And it's just trying to put out good energy to the world and spread freedom from time to time. So,
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
thank you.
We're all set.
Right.
Thank
are we
you.
off?
Thank you. All right.
It says we're still recording, just so.
So that's just the podcast. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
hey, have you ever
I'm gonna
heard
go
the
tell
book
them.
Constitutional Interpretation by Congress?
I don't think I have.
So when I was in law school, do you know who Michael McConnell is? The 10th Circuit Court. He was a short list for the Supreme Court. Conservative.